Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in this special video today, I am celebrating 20,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you all enough for your support, whether you watch my videos on a regular, or if you casually pop in, if you're a subscriber, or if you support the channel on a deeper level with Patreon. Regardless of the type of support, I want to thank you all so much. And to celebrate this milestone of 20,000 subscribers, I have teamed up with Baron of Dice for a pretty sweet giveaway. I have more details down below in the comments of how to enter, as they have some pretty sweet product to give away. There will be some lucky winners that get a deck box, some dice, whether you want them big or average size, and a pretty cool playmat to match the deck box. Again, how to enter, you just go to my Instagram and all the details will be in there. So going back into the video, there's a lot of ways I wanted to celebrate 20,000 subscribers, but I decided to leave it to the community, whether it's on my Discord or even on the YouTube polls. I wanted people to vote on what they wanted to see as far as a 20k special would be, and the majority of the votes landed on personal decks that I have, and so that's what I will be talking about today. So let's get right into it. In this video today, it'll be split into two different categories. Category 1 will focus more on decks that I'm brewing right now. These are decks that I'm currently interested in. I'll discuss why I'm interested in them, my thought process on brewing them, and what I might add into the decks when they're completely built. I'll also discuss the bracket levels as far as power goes, so that way you kind of give an idea of what I want to achieve with these type of decks. And then going into category 2, I will focus on the decks I am currently playing right now. I'll discuss their bracket levels, what makes me drawn to them, and overall my personal play experience with each of these commanders. So now that I've talked about the two categories, let's go into category 1 and talk about unfinished decks and the brew process around them. Alright, so the first deck is technically a concept. I actually don't have a commander picked out for it yet, and that's Gyruda Duma Depths. I personally haven't found a right commander for it because of what I want to do with it. Obviously, this is a clone deck, cloning Gyruda to get more triggers. Of course, I could pick Gyruda as the commander itself, but I think it would be more fun as a companion and utilizing a great Haymaker from the command zone. I have a lot of blink strategies like Displacerkin and Deadeye Navigator. Again, more clones. This is going to be more of a bracket 3, bracket 4 type of deck with like cards like the One Ring. We need all the card draw we could get, especially if we're only exclusively using cards that are even converted mana cost. More clones like Sakashima the Imposter and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. I plan on using this Gyruda more as a token copy of the original Gyruda. I wanted to make sure they're distinctly different. I also liked Will of the Teamer because it's another clone option, but it also can draw you a lot of cards. And if we're milling a lot of cards, Kozilek, Butcher of Truth can put our graveyard into our library again so that we don't have to worry about decking ourselves. Again, this is more of a concept that I kind of put together, not a complete deck that I have, so technically this is kind of cheating, but really it isn't. I've wanted to build a Gyruda companion deck for quite a while. I just haven't found the right commander for it. Obviously I've tried it with Be'lakor the Dark Master, which is probably the most viable situation, but I already have a Grixis deck that I'll talk about later. And then I thought about it with the new Taval, the one from the commander decks that works great with returning things from the graveyard so that you make zombie tokens. I thought that would be a pretty cool concept, but then again, I wanted to be more Gyruda focused, and maybe I just have to build Gyruda himself, but again, I like him as a companion, and so that's technically the first deck that I'm brewing around. More of a concept. I feel like this is probably going to be the longest deck that it takes for me to build, because I do have to find the right commander and the right color combination in doing so. So that's why this is more of a scraps deck, having a lot of cards in here, but not really having a home. And you'll probably even notice that a lot of these are proxies. I proxy a lot of cards with things that I'm tempted to play out, but I don't want to buy them quite yet because I want to test out the deck and see how it works. So proxying is a good way of doing that without breaking the bank. And so that is the first deck that I'm brewing around. Let's go to the next one. Alright, the next commander on this list would be Kinesos Priest of Thassa. Weirdly enough, I actually don't have the card. I tried to go to my local LGS and they never really had the copy of Kinesos, so I might have to buy it somewhere else. But I do basically have what's a scrap kind of deck where I only have about 40% of the cards, I don't have a whole lot. Some are proxies, some are real cards. Again, I don't want to dive into the proxy thing too much, but I usually utilize them to test out decks to see if I like them, and if I do like them enough, I'll buy the real versions. But this has a lot of your normal typical staples with land ramp options, also with removal and interaction. I love Arachnothese as an early game option to ramp, and then later as a big threat being a 12/12. And this is basically a deck that I wanted to build for quite a while because I used to have a Coma the Cosmos Serpent deck, but not a lot of people like playing against Coma. So I do have Coma in this deck. I have both versions. Let me see if I could find them right here. I do have just a printout of Coma the World Eater and Coma the Cosmos Serpent. Both of these are the reason why I wanted to make this deck. I love Coma so much as Jormungandr, which is the World Serpent in Norse mythology. But again, it gets hated out. I could play Coma the World Eater. It's not as hated, but again, I feel like Kinesos can be a great option because it's very cheap. You could cheat out big creatures like Leviathan, Octopus, Serpents, and Octopuses. So I thought it would be a cool concept. Again, I don't have all of it made, but I want to scry to find big sea creatures just to cheat them on the battlefield. All at that rate for 2 mana for Kinesos is quite powerful. I just love the idea, and I thought it would be a fun deck to build as a casual bracket level 2 deck, maybe bracket level 3, depending on what kind of staples I put in there. So I'm excited to make this deck fully and see what comes out of it. But now let's sail the high seas with Captain Howler Sea Scourge. This is a deck that I've made before, scrapped it, but then decided to make it again. But I wanted to focus more on a pirate theme and with a discard theme too. I love pirates. I watch Pirates of the Caribbean. I think this is a good deck to go against the Sea Monsters deck because that's just kind of how things go with pirates. So of course I got Captain Howler focusing on discard, buffing up creatures, and getting card advantage. So that's a perfect commander for this type of deck where a lot of pirates actually do have a lot of discard synergies. I also have Shark Typhoon in this deck. I think it's a great fit because all we're really doing is discarding this card, making a big creature, and while we discard it, we get to buff up a creature with Captain Howler. I also like Mystic Reflection, a very underrated card and a great removal piece in blue if there's another creature on the battlefield. Neheb is technically the one card that's not a pirate in this deck, but works really good with the discard synergy, dealing combat damage, discarding any number of cards, drawing that many cards, and adding that much mana. This is a perfect card to do so in this type of deck. Have some removal like a Braid, have a lot of discard payoffs like Pirate's Pillage, Bitter Reunion. I also have some protection like Lava Spur Boots and Swiftfoot Boots. Again, a lot of normal staples you'd see in a deck. I also have Captain Lannery Storm, which is a pirate payoff of making treasure tokens. Going on and on, I love this deck. The idea for it is to obviously focus on discard and pirates. There's a lot of great Bite and the Thassa effects like Reconnaissance Mission. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. This is very aggressive. I love the concept behind this because it's not your typical is it Spellslinger. I mean, it is, but it isn't. We want to discard cards in a lot of ways, but we also want to mainly focus on combat damage. And that's why I think Captain Howler is going to be a very fun deck, especially for the pirate theme. And maybe I just like Pirates of the Caribbean too much, but having it as a shark is very cool indeed. And I know Aether Drift does get a lot of hate, and I don't think it deserves as much hate as it deserves, but again, it wasn't my favorite set, I will admit. But Captain Howler is a pretty cool commander that I am building right now. Moving on to the next deck, it is going to be Helga Skittish Seer along with Kruga the Macrosage as a companion. This deck is all about 1/1 counters and casting big creatures. I love the new Anti-Venom Horrifying Healer as a reanimation card. We could easily cast it with Helga's ability, so I find that 5 white pips not to be too bad. I also love Vorinclex Monstrous Raider because we're going into the 1/1 counter strategy. We could double those 1/1 counters on Helga or other creatures we control. I have about, again, a lot of different cards in this list that I like, that I kind of put because more nostalgic reasons, like Hogla the Tiny Ape. I love it because it's basically King Kong and it works out as a great removal piece all on a creature. I also love Dragonlord Dromoka because people can't interact with us on our own turn. I also like Warden of the Grove, buffing up another creature by enduring, and Railway Brawler because when a creature enters the battlefield, you basically get that much 1/1 counters equal to its power onto it, so that's pretty powerful. And of course, I gotta talk about Apex Devastator. This is a very cool card and one that's very easy to cast in this type of deck depending on how much mana you have with Helga and the counters, that simply having Cascade, 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 and you better guess it, Cascade, is going to help you win the game, along with Colonian Hydra. Doubling the number of counters that you swing with on combat is going to be huge, and the list could go on and on as far as cards go in this deck. Canopy Gargantuan will get you a huge amount of counters depending on the creature's toughness, and a great card draw engine would be Terra Symbiosis because we're putting a lot of 1/1 counters on our creatures. This will help ensure that we get our hands nice and full outside of our commander. So overall, this is a pretty awesome list. I have a lot of different lands, a lot of different creatures. This is the main focus of the deck. I'm not going to go over it too much, and for each of these decks that I have today, I do have deck lists down below in the description. It's going to be one big giant category of all different sorts of links. So if you want to go into detail a little bit further, you definitely go check out those links too. But that is the Karuga Macro Sage companion deck that I have with Helga, and I'm excited to play it again. Alright, so the next deck I am currently building is Oher Ashnal Deepest Might, and I just gotta say, this card looks so metal. I love the way it's designed. A flaming skull with a flaming sword, along with having a dinosaur arm. I mean, what's cooler than that? I just think the concept is great as far as a god goes in the Aztec-inspired theme of Ixalan. And of course, I went with the burn theme. You have Rolling Vortex, or even Sulfuric Vortex. I'm trying to find the card, but it's in here. There it is. This is all about punishing your opponents for little incremental effects at the beginning of each player's upkeep. You deal 1 damage or even 2 damage depending on which one you have on the battlefield. And Rolling Vortex I think is a little better because if people like to cast free spells, well, that means you're just going to deal that much more damage to them. So again, this is the Punisher theme. I also went with a little bit of a Spell Slinger theme because we want to deal small incremental damages that will turn into huge damage with Oher Ashnal. Spiteful Banditry is a really good board wipe that I like using to produce a lot of treasure when people's creatures die. I also added a lot of cards from the Secret Lair extra life, like Delayed Blast Fireball, Lightning Bolt, and Mana Geyser, a way to get mana, removal, and obviously mass removal. I also like the combo of Abrade and Liquid Metal Torque. Liquid Metal Torque is one of my favorite cards to utilize in any deck that's hard at removing cards. You just turn a non-land permanent into an artifact in addition to its other types until in a turn, so if somebody has a big scary creature on the battlefield, or an enchantment that's hard to remove, especially in this type of deck, we have a way of turning it into an artifact and destroying it with Abrade. And there's a lot of other classics. I also decided to add in Tibble's Trickery because it's a great board wipe, and Lightning Greaves. These are from the Secret Lair that is Spanish inspired. I just thought it'd be a great fit overall. I also have a lot of different staples. Again, this is going to be more of a bracket 4 deck. I have the One Ring because again, we're really lacking in card draw. We really need all the card draw we could get. Mishra's Command is probably one of the best cards you could utilize in this deck. You can loot, you deal damage to a target creature or a target planeswalker, and target creature gets +X/+0 and gains haste until in a turn. This works with Oher Ashnal, buffing it up. And Tyrite Sanctum, I think this is one of the better cards you could use in this deck too, because you give Indestructible to Oher Ashnal, sacrificing it, putting an Indestructible counter on target god. This is huge, and something you may want to consider if you're building Oher Ashnal too. This is a deck that's going to take a lot of work, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end. Alright, so the last deck I am currently brewing is Eddie Brock / Venom Lethal Protector. This is a commander. When I first saw it, I knew it was love at first sight. This was a deck that I knew immediately that I had to build. You're going to notice with a lot of my builds that I like to cheat in big creatures. You may have noticed that with Kinesos, Helga, and now with Venom. This is also focusing on extra combats you see with Port Razor, getting 2 additional combats if you connect with him. I also love Worldspine Worm as a dice trigger. You make 3 5/5s on the battlefield. That's insane. Not only that, when it goes into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. This could be useful in situations where you sacrifice it with Venom, you have that trigger go in the stack, but then you have another trigger with Worldspine going into your deck, and if you accidentally draw into Worldspine, you can just cheat it back into play instead of having it go into the graveyard. So that is a little nifty combo that I wanted to highlight. I also love the Kamigawa dragons. I had to include all these in here. Junji will reanimate something. Kokoshio will drain a bunch of life and you gaining life. And Atsushi will get you advantage of treasure and pseudo card draw in the form of exiling the top cards of your library. So I love the Kamigawa dragons, and again, there's a lot of interesting cards in here that I find very fascinating with Venom. I love Vaultboard Tyrant. It's going to be useful with the token copy it makes when you sacrifice it. So again, there's a lot of different staples. This is going to be a bracket 4 deck focusing on a little bit of a reanimation along with cheating in big giant creatures like Zopandrel Hunger Dominus. I love Zopandrel as a card because it just doubles the power of each creature you control. That is massive. It could help close out the game for sure, especially with Venom. And again, this is about 90% done. I just wanted to highlight some of my favorite cards in here, like Emrakul, Galta, or even Xenagos, God of Revels. And actually, I did want to give a quick snippet. Xenagos, God of Revels was actually my first commander deck that I've ever built. I might build it later in paper as a giveaway, we'll see. But again, Eddie Brock / Venom Lethal Protector is a very fascinating deck that I'm very excited to play around. That's essentially what the deck goal is to sacrifice creatures to get more creatures on the battlefield or other permanents, and then go to town by winning the game by combat damage. What a better way to win in Commander. So those are the decks I am currently building. Now I'm going to move on to decks that I have complete in paper that I have a lot of experience in, and I might go into more detail into them compared to the other decks. So let's get right into it.
3 hours later.
Alright, so the first Commander deck that I do own in paper completely is SpongeBob SquarePants. This deck is all about Universes Beyond. It has a lot of different Universes Beyond legends, and I tried to limit myself, only focusing on Universes Beyond cards that I'm not technically using in any other decks. You're going to notice there's not a One Ring or really powerful Universes Beyond decks. This is basically whatever I drafted or I opened in packs that I wanted to put in a deck, but they didn't really have a right home. But because they're legendary, SpongeBob SquarePants helped fill that role, turning no ones into something, buffing them all up, and giving basically legendary cascade. So SpongeBob is the commander of the deck. I basically have every individual SpongeBob Secret Lair card in this list, like Squidward, like Mr. Krabs even, and even Gary. But again, a lot of these cards like Goldbug or even the Master Multiplied are here strictly because they're Universes Beyond, and they all buff each other up when you have these legends on the battlefield. Sandy Cheeks is a perfect example of card advantage. Whenever we deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card, plus she's indestructible. Very fitting for the character indeed. I also have Gandalf the White in this deck too. When a legendary permanent or an artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I have a lot of versions of Gandalf, and since I had an extra copy, I decided, well, this could go into the list perfectly because it's all about legendaries. The same can be applied for Mithril Coat. This is an all-star because we could protect our commander and protect other legendaries we control. Plankton is an obvious choice because it's SpongeBob themed. Optimus Prime, one of my favorite heroes of all time. I was actually tempted to make Optimus Prime as a deck, but honestly, I'm just not a big fan of flip cards. I don't know why. Though I will say Optimus Prime might be the exception. I might eventually build this in paper. I have a lot of normal staples like Chaos Warp, Rockfall Veil, Underground Sea. Again, a lot of cards that were from Universes Beyond. This is definitely more of a bracket 1, bracket 2 level deck where I just put a lot of jank in here, and it kind of works, it kind of doesn't. I mean, you kind of get the point. I mean, the meanest card in here is most likely Deadpool trading card or really just a counter spell. But again, I just love a lot of these cards for the meme value, like Dismember or even Daze or, you know, Inevitable Betrayal. This is definitely more of a meme deck if anything else. Of course, you have Ian Malcolm with his shirt off. I just love this deck so much. It's a very fun deck to play around, mainly because it's cards that I wouldn't normally use in a deck that I could just jam in all one deck, and it's just a blast. So that is my SpongeBob deck, focusing solely on Universes Beyond. Again, around a bracket 1 to bracket 2 level deck. The only reason why I would say it's bracket level 2 is because Jodah is just that powerful, so it might be closer to 2, but everything else is definitely just jank. And I also have this pretty funny deck box with SpongeBob with the meme and everything, so it's definitely one I wanted to highlight for sure. Alright, moving on to the next list. This would be Marnius Calgar, and this one is an absolute machine as far as a token commander goes. I made a deck video on this a little while ago, so it might just be a little of a rehash if you haven't seen it before. This is a crazy token commander, drawing cards whenever you make one or more tokens, and of course it has the activated ability by making tokens on the battlefield, 2/2 Astartes warrior creature tokens of vigilance. This is all about token generation, whether you want to make it with Amphibian Downpour, which is a great removal spell. It has the Storm ability, so the more spells you cast during your turn, the more token enchantment copies you're going to make of Amphibian Downpour, and making all your opponent's creatures have base power and toughness 1 and lose all abilities. This is absolutely essential in this type of deck, giving you card advantage and removal. I also love Settle the Wreckage. This is more of a personal choice. I catch so many people off guard, or this can be an upside for us if we have a lot of Astartes warrior creature tokens on the battlefield, but we don't have a lot of ramp. We could swing in with them, target ourselves, and gain a bunch of mana. This is basically a large scale version of Path to Exile when creatures attack, and a lot of staples you'd normally find in a general sense, Elspeth Stormslayer, along with Exalted Sunborn. Weirdly enough, I actually had Anointed Procession in this list, but I decided to take it out. And that kind of sounds like blasphemy because it's the original white token doubler, but these are just so much better. Making tokens themselves with Elspeth and Exalted Sunborn can be absolutely critical because you could warp it in just for 2 mana, and also because it's not a legendary creature, you can make a token copy of it, make 2 token copies of it, and additionally make more token copies of a lot of different things. Mirkwood Bats can be a great win con in the deck. When your tokens enter, each opponent loses 1 life. Lotha Corrupt Sheriff will get us mana. Again, there's a lot of cool things about this deck. The best card by far is Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe absolutely rocks in here because whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2 mana. If that player doesn't, you create a treasure token. So whenever someone draws a card, and if they don't pay, you're drawing a card too. Thousand Moon Smithy and Illustrious Wanderglyph are also great in here because of the token generation they produce, especially Illustrious Wanderglyph. I've been wanting to put this in a deck for a while, and I feel like this is the right fit. Voice of Victory and another token doubler like Mondrak Glory Dominus, Ink Shield. Again, the list could go on and on. Charismatic Conqueror, Ocelot Pride. This deck is absolutely stacked with a huge amount of token generation that just could go on, and that's why I love this deck so much. Even though it is definitely a target of a deck, it is a very fun overall deck and probably one of the best commanders from Warhammer 40k easily. Alright, the next commander deck I wanted to focus on is my buff commanders for buff dudes. If you're not familiar with this, I made a video about this a little while ago explaining that I put a lot of buff creatures in this list, quite literally that they have biceps the size of tree trunks. But there's a little secret detail in here. There is also goth chicks, because what's the biggest weakness in a lot of different buff dudes? Yeah, that's right, goth chicks. And you're probably wondering, where is the other commander? I saw that there was the other version of Tevesh Zot, the one where it looks like a tombstone, so I traded in my other Tevesh, and Tevesh Zot that I bought is coming in the mail. So that's why you don't see Tevesh here, but he is here in spirit. This is a deck that is newer in the list. I played it about 4 or 5 times, and it's a blast. So again, this is buff commanders for buff dudes. Kamal Heartakroza is here to buff up all your creatures, and I went with a lot of different things as far as a go white strategy. I have a lot of the haunted lands because of the goth chicks. I also went with a little bit of a token strategy. I have a lot of mana dorks in here, and they look tiny right now, but they will get buffed up by Kamal with his extra juice. But there's a lot of interesting cards in here. I have a lot of normal staples. Stinking Study is very good with Kamal Heartakroza because we could draw an insane amount of cards all at the expense of life. Zopandrel Hunger Dominus, another card in here that I just put in every single deck, it almost feels like, because it'll double the power and toughness of each creature. And you could stack these triggers. For example, you could have this resolve first where all your creatures get +3/+3, and then on top of that they will get doubled with Zopandrel. The Meat Hook Massacre is a great way to ensure that we get a lot of Aristocrats packages going on. Zulaport Cutthroat, and let me tell you about this guy. Look how much abs he has. I think I'm counting a 10 pack if I'm not mistaken. That's just absolutely crazy. Skull Clan for card draw, Bastion of Remembrance for that Aristocrats, and of course you got the goth chick with Blood Artist. There's a lot of metal things in here that I like. Again, this is going into Aristocrats along with buffing up your creatures. So this is a very fun deck. Again, this is a go wide, go buff, and sacrifice them all to the goth chicks kind of deck like Braids Arisen Nightmare. So I thought this would be a fun interpretation on a deck with a little bit of a theme, but again, I think it's more of a bracket level 3 deck, because even though it is about buffing up your creatures, it can win the game almost on the spot if you cast Kamal or if you just drain your opponents. So either way, it's a fun time. Alright, let's fly into the top 3 and talk about Ureni of the Ynrin. This is my 3rd favorite commander deck I am currently playing. This is all about cheating in big giant creatures like dragons. It has flying and trample, so that is a key part. It could actually go for commander lethal with 3 swings away, or if you even have Twin Flame Tyrant, maybe even sooner, because let's just say hypothetically you swing in with Ureni, you cheat in Twin Flame Tyrant, instead of 7 damage, you're going to be dealing 14 damage. That's absolutely insane with Twin Flame Tyrant. I also love cards like Whirlwing Stormbrood, giving that tempo plan of having spells you cast like sorcery or dragon spells have flash. That is going to be pretty great in instances where people have their removal ready, but they don't know when they need to use it. Also in this deck, I have a lot of the fetch lands that have that dragon scale foiling. This is incredible to look at. You're going to notice it later on as I look into the deck, but I just wanted to give a quick mention because these are insanely beautiful and I had to make sure I collected them all. But again, there's a lot of dragons that you'll recognize in here. I also added in some extra combats like Hellkite Charger along with Last Night Together. This is going to go into that aggressive strategy because we want to swing in with Ureni. Getting multiple swings in or multiple flicker effects will help ensure we could just close out the game. Food Chain is another way we could win the game too with Squee the Immortal, get infinite creature mana, keep recasting Ureni from the command zone, sacrificing it to Food Chain, and getting our whole board onto the battlefield. Again, going into those extra combats. And honestly, I just gotta say I really love this deck for what it means to me. I love dragons. It's one of my favorite fantasy creatures of all time. And here are some other dragon scale foilings like I mentioned, like Verdant Catacombs and Scalding Tarn. I also wanted to add in Stomping Ground specifically with a Tarka in the art. This is not the most fancy version, but again, it has a dragon in there. Another card that's absolutely busted in here and I didn't realize at the time was Summon Bahamut, because technically it is a dragon, so you can put this in the list and cheat it into play and destroy up to one target non-land permanent. For the first two lore chapters and the third lore chapter, draw 2 cards, and the fourth lore chapter can help you win the game depending on how much high CMC permanents you have. You could deal that much damage to each opponent. This could help you win the game for sure. Again, I have a lot of dragon staples in here. Terror of the Peaks is a well-known one. Cyclonic Rift, Aggravated Assault can help combo with another card like Old Gnawbone that you'll probably see in here soon. Another fetch land like Arid Mesa. I don't have obviously Marsh Flats in here because it doesn't fit in the color combination. Genesis Ultimatum is a card I absolutely love and treasure. When I was playing Standard in Ikoria, I played this with Terror of the Peaks. It helped me close out many games when I was playing Standard. And I will say a personal shout out for Atarka World Render. This is the card that basically got me into Magic the Gathering. Not this specific art version, but the previous art version. When I was looking at Target, I stumbled upon these cards and I thought they were cool, and I grabbed a pack back in like 2015 or so, and I fell in love with Magic the Gathering ever since, even though I was in and out of it at the time. But now, of course, I'm fully committed. As you see, I have a YouTube channel with 20,000 subscribers. But again, this is a deck that I absolutely cherish. I could just go on and on. It's just a blast to play, and dragons are one of the funnest things you can do in Magic the Gathering, at least in my opinion. Playing them and swinging over your opponents for victory. But now let's move on to my second favorite deck. This kind of goes back and forth as my second or first favorite deck. Right now, currently, it is my second favorite deck playing it right now. This deck I'm constantly just going back and forth with, adding new cards, taking out new cards. And this is a deck I'm basically known by. It's my Sauron the Dark Lord deck. This is basically a Reanimator deck. A little bit of Aristocrats by only by a couple of means. I got new sleeves, so that's why it's all super flimsy right now. I might put half down and then talk about the other half. But this deck is all about one thing and one thing only, and that's summoning the 9. If you notice in this deck, they're all the foil showcase scrolls treatments for all the Nazgul, and this was actually pretty cheap at first. They only costed me about like 20 bucks a pop, but now they're just super expensive and really hard to get, so I have all 9 of them in this deck. And I do have a lot of reanimation spells too, like Necromancy, Afterlife from the Loam, which is quite powerful because we're in a self-discard theme. This will most likely only cost 3 black mana every time for 4 creatures. That is going to be great value. Victimize is also another perfect card in this list because we're making those orc armies. We could sacrifice that orc army to return 2 creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Of course, they'll enter tapped, but that's not a big deal. Animate Dead, I just love this card because it's a zombified Spinosaurus. And of course, one of the win conditions of the deck is Rise of the Dark Realms. If you pair this up with like Terror of the Peaks and a lot of other cards in your graveyard, most likely it's going to be spelling good game for your opponents. Also, something you'll notice in this list is I have a lot of different treatments. I have Old Border, I have the Showcase Scrolls, and I have alternate art treatments. So like Warren Soul Trader is one of the best cards you could utilize in this deck because whenever an opponent casts a spell, you amass, and then you get to sacrifice that creature to create a treasure token. So each time a player casts a spell, you essentially get to make a treasure token. That is absolutely insane. Dragon Lord Kolaghan is only in here mainly because other creatures you control have haste. So if we have Rise of the Dark Realm trigger, we want to make sure all those creatures can gain haste somehow. Plus, it's a dragon, it's very cool, and also some really cool art. I know this is is not the most optimal way of giving creatures haste, but it is a fun way, and that's why I tried to design this deck, is focusing on fun along with getting it powerful. And that's why I do have like something like Consecrated Sphinx. This is the invocation treatment that I got a long time ago. I think I got it for like $80. Now it's something like $200. It's quite crazy how expensive this got. But drawing 2 cards off of whenever an opponent draws a card is going to be insane. Ancient Brass Dragon, Cavern Horde Dragon, Starwinder, one of the newest cards on this list, will help us get some value of reanimating cards, getting treasures, and drawing. I also like Doom Whisper along with Hullbreaker Horror. I like Hullbreaker Horror because it kind of reminds me of the Watcher in the Water, even though technically we have a Watcher in the Water, but I'd rather replace it with this because it's much cooler. Archon of Cruelty is it enters our attacks trigger, so this is obviously a great fun card. I also just like the art treatment again. Some of these cards, the reason why I have them in this list is because of the art treatments, and they're great reanimation targets. And Razaketh, I know I mentioned a lot of cards that are the best cards in this list, but Razaketh is easily one of the best ones because it acts as a repeatable tutor with Sauron on the battlefield, because whenever an opponent casts a spell, you amass 1, which means you get to tutor them, sacrificing them for free, and it's just constantly repeatable whenever an opponent casts a spell. So these two are basically a match made in heaven. I also have a lot of Lord of the Rings cards in here, like Morgul Knife, Dead Marshes, Diabolic Intent, Call of the Ring, Spiteful Banditry, Pact of Negation, Witch King, Palantir, Mount Doom, Orcish Bowmasters, and obviously the One Ring. So whatever kind of treatment you see with Lord of the Rings, most likely it's going to be in here. I try to mix a power level of bracket level 4 along with having fun with this list, and I gotta say I'm absolutely happy with it. The One Ring is crazy. I'm just blown away with how expensive this got. I got this for like $150 when it got first released, but now it's just super expensive. And I don't mean to brag, I'm just saying maybe sometimes it's just better to buy cards early because you never know how expensive they're going to turn out. But again, mostly Lord of the Rings cards mixed in with a lot of different cards from other universes too, like Old Border Fetchlands and Shocklands, Balrog of Moria, Vampiric Tutor. Again, a lot of cool things that I've honestly loved collecting over time, especially with Lord of the Rings, and it's all in one deck at a bracket level 4, so I could not be happier with this deck with Sauron the Dark Lord. Alright, so next up is potentially my favorite deck of all time. Again, it's kind of tied with Sauron the Dark Lord, and that's Gishath Sun's Avatar. This is a deck I've been playing a lot longer than Sauron the Dark Lord. In fact, a lot longer than most of the decks I'm currently playing right now. And of course, I have this also from Etsy, the Jurassic Park official gate, and I just think it's very neat. So it's kind of hard because I feel like this is more of my signature deck rather than Sauron the Dark Lord, because if you see with my channel, I'm all about dinosaurs, being known as Jurassic Magic, and Gishath Sun's Avatar is one of my favorite commanders. It's easily a commander I always go back to over and over again just because of how fun it is. Also in this deck, I do have Kahira the Orphan Guard as a companion, mainly because I'm only exclusively running dinosaurs. I felt like there was an obvious choice right there. I didn't want to run into any humans when I have a Gishath trigger going on. I just wanted to make sure I got dinosaurs only, and Kahira is a great option because it could buff up my dinosaurs and give them vigilance. I also wanted to highlight one of my favorite dinosaurs, Galta Stampede Tyrant. This is a nightmare of a card to deal with, especially if you have a lot of dinosaurs in your hand. You most likely just cast this and then just spill out a bunch of dinosaurs. I also love another card like Bronze Peak Foragers as removal, hunting Velociraptors in a way to cheat Gishath Sun's Avatar into the battlefield, making him only cost 3 mana instead of the whole whopping 8 mana. Got Swooping Pteranodon as sort of removal in a way. Atali Primal Conqueror, everyone knows this and a lot of people hates this. Casting a lot of free spells off your opponent's library and our own library is going to be huge. Just kind of going over some of my favorites. I just love actually Register Alpha. A lot of people don't understand why I have this in the list, because Gishath already has haste. Why do you need to give other dinosaurs you control have haste? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I do have some extra combat cards in this list. If we swing in with Gishath, put a bunch of dinosaurs on the battlefield, most likely they won't have haste unless we have this on the battlefield. And if we go into that extra combat, we could just give all our dinosaurs haste and swing in, and potentially for victory. Pantlaza is also a good secondary general in this list. I almost had the consideration of swapping Pantlaza as the commander, but then decided against it because I just love Gishath because of my personal history with it. I also love Zakama Primal Calamity. I mean, what's not to love? It's basically a 3-headed T-Rex that could deal damage, destroy stuff, and gain life. I mean, what's not to love? And also this Judge promo is absolutely incredible. I also have Tyrannosaurus Rex, otherwise known as a Atali Primal Storm. Sunfrill Imitator, that could be a second second copy of Gishath, Valbor Tyrant that could get us card draw. The list could go on and on with the amount of dinosaurs that we could put into the battlefield. This is just basically a small percentage of what we can put in. Of course, I added the one ring. This is a bracket 4 level deck because I wanted to make dinosaurs powerful and fun, and I feel like that was one way to do so. I have a lot of different treatments in here, like the gray henge with the party tree. And going down into the list, there's just a lot of options that I considered in here. I really tuned this deck to perfection, at least in my opinion. I made sure I got the right amount of lands, interaction, and of course dinosaurs. I made sure I got dinosaurs the love they deserve in this deck, and I feel like overall I accomplished that in a very specific way. So Gishath Sun's Avatar, definitely one of my favorite decks of all time. A lot of people play him in a little bit of a different strategy where they want to rush him in right away and swing in, get a bunch of dinosaurs, but that'll make you enemy number 1 right away, where people will try to take you out pretty quickly, and I feel like that's not the direction to go. I actually don't ramp him out pretty early. I actually just wait for the perfect opportune time, if it's after a board wipe or if there's nothing really going on the board in the late game. Most likely that'll help me close out the game in a general sense, because usually there's about 2 to 3 board wipes before someone closes out the game, and most likely that is me because I do run a decent amount of board wipes in this deck. So overall, I gotta say Gishath Sun's Avatar, one of my favorite decks of all time. I can't talk about it enough. I already made a previous deck tech about it. I've actually made multiple deck techs about it. I think I made a total of 3 on my channel so far. I just can't get enough of this commander, even in today's standard, because this is what, like 8 years old. So again, love this, and absolutely love this. By far one of my favorite decks of all time. Whew, alright, that was a long video. I didn't mean to make this over 30 minutes long. Usually I try to make my videos about 10 to 15 minutes. This was a long one, but I feel like it was worth it just to showcase my lists, because a lot of people do ask for what kind of decks I'm playing or currently I'm building. Also, don't forget about the giveaway down below in the comments. I have the link posted on Instagram. Make sure you're following Baron of Dice along with Jurassic Magic to enter. But going back into my closing remarks, this has been such a fun hobby of making a lot of videos and sharing my thoughts about specific commanders or a lot of different cards. Of course, the best part about this all is talking to each and every one of you, whether you comment down below on my Discord or if you're one of my patrons. I can't thank you enough for your support. This has been such a blast to make YouTube videos, and I'm not stopping there. Of course, the next goalpost is reaching 50,000 followers. So if you feel like I've been worth your time, definitely go subscribe to the channel. It definitely goes a long way in supporting the channel. So with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.